My name is Constance Hale. The night my father's fist shattered my jaw. My mother didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She looked down at me bleeding on the hardwood and whispered, "Don't stain the floor." In that instant, I realized I was worth less than the shine of the wood beneath me. Something inside me broke for good. The daughter who craved their approval died right there, and the soldier who would fight back was born. His face barely changed when I told him. Just a flicker, a twitch at the corner of his jaw before the mask of a polished professor gave way to something darker. 1 second I was standing there, insisting that my future belonged to the army and not to his campaign posters. And the next, his fist crashed into my jaw with a sickening crack. Pain shot through my skull as I hit the polished walnut floor, copper flooding my mouth, the sting sharp enough to blur the edges of the room. I looked up at him through tears and blood, half expecting, half praying, for even a shred of regret in his eyes. There was none, only the cold fury of a man who saw me as a possession that dared to defy him. Then came the sharper wound, the one that cut deeper than bone, the sound of my mother's heels clicking closer, her perfume faint in the air. She didn't kneel down, she didn't reach for me. She simply glanced at the dark stain spreading beneath my face and said in a voice flat as glass, "You've ruined the floor." Something inside me snapped clean in that moment. The desperate daughter who spent years chasing their approval, the girl who smiled for photographs and swallowed her own voice, died right there on that hardwood. What rose in her place was quieter, colder, steadier. A soldier who knew that survival was no longer enough. I would fight back, and I would never again mistake their indifference for love. I stumbled into my room, slammed the lock, and flicked on the light. The mirror glared back at me with a face I barely recognized, swollen jaw, split lip, blood soaking through the white of my blouse. My hands shook as I raised my phone, but my voice came out steady, trained, almost clinical. Sergeant Constance Hale, 2300 hours. Assaulted by target Alistair Hale. I saved the recording, uploaded it to a secure cloud I'd set up years ago, and scrolled to a single name. Marina Vega. We'd made a pact long ago. If I ever used the code words empty quiver, she'd know it meant the unthinkable, the highest level of danger. When she answered, her voice was clipped, urgent. "Get to New York, now." I hung up, shoved what little I could into a bag, and tried to pull cash for a ticket. The ATM flashed decline, again and again. My bank account was locked, every cent frozen. Twist, in one phone call, my father had cut off my lifeline, proving he could strangle my freedom without ever raising his voice. Marina's apartment smelled of coffee and overworked computers, stacks of books leaning precariously against the walls. I sat on her worn couch, the city humming outside the window, and memories flooded in like ghosts I'd tried to bury. At 18, when my acceptance letter to ROTC arrived, I thought I'd finally earned his respect. He only smirked and said, "Not Ivy League." At 17, after my first heartbreak, I ran to my mother in tears. She didn't hug me, didn't even look up from the sequined gown draped over her shoulders. "Men don't like weakness. Constance." The sting of those words still echoed. And then my grandfather, David Hale, a Zupui veteran, pressed his medal into my hand on his deathbed, rasping, "Don't let anyone extinguish that fire in you." A week later, I found it locked away in my father's study, displayed as part of the family's legacy. That betrayal still burned deeper than any bruise. I was still lost in the ache of it when Marina slid her laptop across the table. An email filled the screen, sent from my mother's account to a local paper. "Our daughter is experiencing emotional difficulties. The family is united in providing support." Twist. They weren't just trying to silence me with fists, they were trying to erase my credibility, paint me as unstable before the world could ever hear the truth. The office was cold, the kind of sterile government room where the walls seemed to hum with fluorescent light. Major Harper Dunn sat behind a metal desk, her uniform as sharp as the tone in her voice. She studied the bruise on my jaw without pity or hesitation and said flatly, "I don't care who your father is. In this office, you are a soldier who needs protection." Her words sliced through the fog I'd been drowning in. Within minutes, she was drafting a military protective order, my nightmare no longer a private shame, but an official case file in the Army's system. That evening, I found myself in a greasy Brooklyn diner, the smell of bacon and burnt coffee clinging to the air. A man in a faded Vietnam vet cap glanced at my face, said nothing, and quietly paid my bill before slipping out the door. His silent nod carried more weight than any speech my father had ever given. For a fleeting moment, I felt seen, even respected. Twist. The moment didn't last. My phone lit up with a familiar number, except it wasn't him. It was the line of a federal judge, one of my father's old friends. I answered, and there was my father's voice, smooth as honey at first. "Sweetheart, we're worried. Let's fix this together." Then his tone shifted. Razor-edged, dripping menace. "Don't force me to destroy you." The next morning, a box arrived at Marina's apartment, wrapped in elegant paper and tied with satin ribbon. I froze when I opened it. Glossy photos of horseback rides in Martha's Vineyard, Christmas mornings by a towering tree, carefully curated snapshots of a family that had never really existed. On top lay a letter in my mother's delicate handwriting. "You are killing your mother." My hands shook, shame rising like bile. Each page of that album whispered that I was ungrateful, cruel, a daughter who had betrayed the people who gave her everything. For a moment, I almost believed it. Then Marina snatched the book from me and slammed it shut. Her eyes were fierce. "This isn't memory. This is ammunition." The truth hit me harder than the photos ever could. I was still reeling when the television lit up with breaking news. My father at a podium, tears glistening as he announced the launch of the David Hale PTSD Foundation in honor of my grandfather. He spoke about sacrifice, about soldiers battling unseen demons, and then the blade slid between my ribs, including my own daughter. Twist. He had taken my grandfather's name, his medals, his legacy, and twisted it into a weapon to humiliate me. Twist again. If I stayed silent, he would rewrite the story entirely, turning my pain into his theater, and when the curtain closed, I would no longer exist except as the footnote of his performance. The apartment no longer felt like Marina's home. It had transformed into a war room. Stacks of coffee cups littered the table. Maps of New York spread wide beneath her quick hands as she marked routes and systems with sharp red ink. Harper Dunn leaned against the edge of the desk, reading aloud the statutes that could corner a senator, her clipped voice turning legal codes into weapons. Rowan Blake sat across from me, posture rigid, eyes steady, promising with just his presence that the Army wouldn't swallow me whole. For the first time in days, I felt less like prey and more like part of a unit. Then came the knock at the door. A man stepped in, nervous, shifting from foot to foot. The stripes on his sleeve marked him as a staff sergeant. Keller. He told us in a low, trembling voice how he had once filed a complaint against the son of one of my father's biggest donors. A week later, the file vanished, and orders sent him to a frozen outpost in Alaska. His career, his life, derailed. His signature on a sworn statement trembled. But it was there. Twist 1. My father's abuse of power wasn't just mine to bear. It was a pattern, a system. Twist 2. Marina's eyes lit with the thrill of discovery when she pulled up the schematics of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "The events run through a third-party vendor," she explained. "Their portal's wide open. I can slip someone into the AV team, full control of sound and visuals." My chest tightened. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But for the first time, I saw it clearly, a real counterstrike, mapped out like a military operation. The plan was simple in its brutality. I would walk in on my parents' arms, smile for the cameras, and let my father believe he had won me back. Pride would do the rest. He'd parade me before the donors. then pull me on stage as his crowning jewel. I stood in front of the mirror in my service uniform, the fabric pressed crisp, metals polished bright. Makeup dulled the fading bruise, but it couldn't hide the steel in my eyes. The girl who once cowered was gone. Twist 3. The night before the gala. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. If you open your mouth, I'll tell every reporter you're lying out of spite. Don't destroy this family. Her words were sharpened like knives, designed to cut through the thin layer of resolve I'd built. I stared at the screen, then typed slowly. You never knew me, and you'll never be able to destroy me. I pressed send and felt something snap. Not a break, but a release. Marina leaned over my shoulder, smirk tugging at her lips. You just cut the last chain. Twist 4, for the first time in my life. I wasn't fighting to survive their control. I was free. And with that freedom came something far more dangerous than rage. Calm, unshakable determination. I wasn't just prepared to face them. I was ready to end this. The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum glittered like frozen stars, casting light across a sea of tuxedos and sequined gowns. The air hummed with the murmur of donors, politicians, and journalists. Every table crowded with power dressed in silk and ambition. Cameras lined the back wall, red recording lights blinking like a row of watchful eyes. My father thrived in it. He stood at the podium, draped in velvet and marble grandeur, his voice rich and commanding as he spoke of legacy, sacrifice, and the honor of bearing the Hale name. The audience hung on every word, clinking glasses of champagne, nodding as if they, too, were part of the myth he spun. Then, as scripted by his ego, he turned toward me in the crowd, his hand lifted, beckoning. And tonight, he boomed, I have the greatest privilege of all, welcoming my daughter, my pride, my proof that our family's service endures. Applause rippled through the atrium as he extended his arm. I rose, heart steady, every step measured across the marble floor. When I reached him, his arm coiled around my shoulders in what looked like paternal affection. His lips brushed close to my ear, the smile frozen for the cameras. Say exactly what I told you, he hissed, or you'll regret it. The spotlight was blinding, hot on my face. I adjusted the microphone, let the room hush, and allowed a small smile to curve my lips. I'd like to share a few images, I said evenly, of the support my family has given me. For a breath, the screen behind us went black. Then twist 1. The projection flickered to life with an image so raw it ripped the air out of the room. My swollen bruised face from that night in Boston, lip split, jaw mottled in purple. Gasps spread like a wave through the audience. The image shifted to the video log I had recorded. My own voice, low and steady, filling the grand hall. Sergeant Constance Hale, 2,300 hours. Assaulted by target Alistair Hale. The words echoed against marble and glass. Undeniable. Then came the final blow. The speakers crackled with a recording no one had ever heard outside that night. My father's voice, stripped of polish, thick with venom. I built you. I can just as easily destroy you. The words slashed through the silence like a blade. The audience froze, some staring in shock, others fumbling for their phones, flashes already erupting like gunfire. My father's face drained of color, his smile collapsing as if it had been nailed there too long. My mother, jeweled and pristine, brought a trembling hand to her mouth, and then, through the chaos, came order. The crowd parted as Major Harper Dunn strode forward, flanked by 2 military police officers in crisp uniforms. They mounted the stage with the calm inevitability of a verdict. Harper's voice rang sharp and official into the microphones, carrying over the stunned murmurs. Senator Alistair Hale, you are under investigation for the assault of an active-duty United States Army soldier. You are coming with us. The cameras exploded in flashes. The audience erupted, half in disbelief, half in outrage. My father stood paralyzed, the polished mask stripped away, leaving only a man small and cornered under the weight of truth. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, metallic and final. For the first time in my life, the story wasn't his to tell. It was mine, and I had told it to the world. The morning headlines blared with a name the press had crafted overnight: the Hale collapse. Every screen, every feed carried the footage. My face bruised, my father's threats echoing, the cuffs snapping shut under the blinding lights of the Met. Half the country called me a hero, a soldier brave enough to expose corruption. The other half sneered that I was nothing more than a traitor, a fame-hungry daughter willing to destroy her own blood. I scrolled long enough to see one venomous comment. She just wanted attention. My stomach knotted, shame creeping back like smoke seeping under a locked door. Marina reached over, snatched the remote, and killed the screen. Her voice was sharp, protective. "Don't let them touch you! You won! That's what matters!" But the victory didn't silence the ghosts. My phone rang, the caller ID glowing with a name I could never quite ignore. My mother, her voice cracked with rehearsed grief, thick with the performance she had perfected at galas and fundraisers. "Constance, listen to me. You owe us. Your father has lost everything, his career, his reputation. You're killing him. You're killing me." The tears in her voice weren't real, but the words still struck with the weight of years of conditioning. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and forced my reply out steady as stone. "I've already paid. I paid with my youth, my dreams, and with my blood on that walnut floor. I don't owe you a single thing anymore." The silence on the other end was deafening, her control over me snapping like brittle glass. Twist 2 came when I agreed to something my therapist suggested: to look my father in the eye one last time, not for him, but for me, for closure. The detention center smelled of bleach and stale air, the halls echoing with a kind of hollow quiet. He sat behind the thick glass in a plain jumpsuit, smaller than I had ever seen him, the aura of power stripped away. His eyes were sunken, but still searching for an angle, for leverage. When the receiver crackled to life, his voice rasped, "I did it all for you. Everything I built, it was for you." I lifted my hand, stopping him. My voice was calm, even, stripped of the desperation he once thrived on. "No. You did it for yourself. Every law, every speech, every photo. None of it was for me." His mouth twitched, searching for his old arsenal of words, but nothing came. I leaned closer, my gaze steady through the plexiglass. "I didn't come here for an apology. I know you're incapable of one. I didn't come to gloat. I came to tell you that you have no power over me anymore. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being angry." He blinked, confusion rippling through the emptiness in his eyes. For the first time, I felt the scales balance, not because he had broken, but because I no longer needed him to. I let the words settle, then spoke the line that was mine alone: "I forgive you." A flicker of triumph sparked in his eyes, as though he believed forgiveness meant victory. I didn't let him keep it. "Not because you deserve it. You don't. I forgive you because I deserve peace, and I can't have it as long as I carry this hate." I placed the receiver down gently, stood, and walked out without looking back. Behind me sat the ruins of a man who once believed he was untouchable. Ahead of me stretched something far more powerful than revenge: freedom. A year later, I stood at attention on the parade field at Fort Jackson, the newly pinned bars of a second lieutenant gleaming beneath the rising sun. The air was cool, the sky washed in gold, and the sound of the band carried across rows of crisp uniforms. In the audience sat Marina, Harper, and Rowan, their smiles steady. Proud, my real family, forged not by blood but by loyalty and truth. When the ceremony ended, I felt the weight of my past loosen, replaced by the promise of what lay ahead. I had established the David Hale Memorial Fund, in my grandfather's name, to help young men and women break free from abusive homes and find their own paths. A letter arrived from the first scholarship recipient, words scrawled in nervous ink. "You didn't just save yourself, You saved us, too. Reading it, I realized the fire my grandfather spoke of hadn't died. It had been passed forward. The next morning, as dawn broke over the Carolina pines, I led my platoon of cadets on their first run. Boots pounded the earth in unison, breath rising in clouds against the crimson horizon. My chest ached, but not from fear. For the first time, I wasn't running away from darkness. I was leading them toward the light.